Are you one of those people who are interested in the sound of a fretless guitar and who are wondering if you can just take an old guitar, rip out the frets and start playing fretless? Surprise, the answer is yes and no. Hey guys, what's up? This is Tom Fountainhead, and playing fretless guitar has been one of the most important elements in my career in the music business so far. And I thought I will be addressing the top 5 misconceptions about playing fretless guitar for you today, so stay tuned. So misconception number 1 is that fretless guitars are just like normal guitars, but without frets. And that's not really true. That's maybe what it looks like for an outside person who hasn't played a fretless guitar before, because it has all the same features as a regular guitar. It has, a fretboard, it has pickups, it has, same amount of strings, it has the shape of a guitar, you plug it into an amplifier, all of those things. But when you start playing fretless guitar, you quickly realize that it's completely its own thing. It's its own beast, its own animal. And you can do a lot of stuff that you can do on a regular guitar, but there's also a lot of stuff that you can't do, and even more stuff that you can only do on a fretless guitar. So the applications are different, the sound is different, the feel is different, the techniques that you have to use are different, and you basically have to relearn to play guitar in order to play fretless guitar. You have to approach it as a new instrument and a different thing. And the more you are able to approach it as a new thing, a new challenge, the better you will be at it. If you come to fretless guitar basically expecting to play the things that you have learned and developed for yourself on a fretted guitar, you will be disappointed. So just as an example, you don't bend on a fretless guitar. And bending, I guess, is just one of the most central and basic techniques on a regular fretted guitar that everybody uses who's ever played the instrument. Now, on a fretless guitar, you don't bend. Anything that has to do with pitch, so bending up and down the string, vibrato, all of these things that basically change the pitch of the note that you're playing, are being done horizontally on one string. Misconception number 2, you play entirely by ear. Again, not true, and it's actually quite the opposite. So it is true that you do need to have a pretty well-developed ear for intonation, right? Because intonation is the name of the game on the fretless guitar. However, if things get a little bit more busy on a fretless guitar, you cannot rely on your ear alone. And actually, your muscle memory is your biggest advantage and your best friend on a fretless guitar. Because even the tiniest changes in how you attack the strings, how you hold the guitar neck, how you are in a certain position, how you angle your finger, how you attack the strings, all those tiny little nuances make a bigger impact on a fretless guitar than they do on a fretted guitar. And so playing by ear is not enough. Having a good ear is not enough. You have to have really good muscle memory, and you have very good visual orientation on the fretboard as well. These 3 things go hand in hand to enable you to play a fretless guitar in any convenient way. Because if you don't, if you, for example, and this has happened to me, if you are on a stage and the light is maybe reflected on the fretboard and you don't have any orientation where you are on this one piece, in my case, metal fretboard, then chances are you're just gonna get lost. And before you even can engage your ear to find the correct spot for the correct intonation, just this tiny moment has passed and you blew your chance. So you have to be aware of visually where you are on the fretboard at all time. You have to have very good muscle memory to find those tiny little spots on the fretboard where you can get the correct intonation. And then on top of that, you need to have very trained ear for intonation to make those decisions in the moment. Is it intonating right? Do I have to change something? Yes or no? So all of those things work hand in hand. It's not just playing by ear. Misconception number 3, you do not need to tune your guitar. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but I've heard this one line a million times. And I remember the first ever rehearsal with my band at the time, where I used a fretless guitar. I started tuning the instrument, and my drummer at that time turned to me and said, "Why do you even bother tuning that thing? It's fretless." And people just assume that you adjust the intonation of everything that you're trying to play on the fly. So tuning doesn't make much of a difference. And in reality, because of what I just described about how sensitive the instrument is, tuning is actually more important. So I can't tell you how many takes I've recorded playing fretless guitar that I had to throw away because maybe the G string was off, just 8 to 10 cents, something tiny like that. And again, the fretless guitar is a very sensitive instrument. Tiny changes make big impacts in terms of intonation and tone. So of course, you want to have stable tuning on any guitar that you're using, fretted or fretless. But on the fretless guitar, because of this unique combination of these three factors that I just explained, visual orientation, muscle memory, and ear training, the busier the playing situation is, the harder it is to make those adjustments on the fly. And what that means in reality is that tuning is a very sensitive issue on the fretless guitar, even more so than on a regular guitar. Here's misconception number 4. You can't play chords. Not true, but there's a little bit more to the story. So you can play chords, no worries, I do it all the time. However, you have to adjust the way that you play chords on a fretless guitar. Again, fretless guitar is a different instrument, and you can't just take all the vocabulary that you've built on a fretted guitar, take it to the fretless and expect it to work. You just have to you have to put in the time and the work to make chords work on a fretless guitar. And you basically have to let go of some things, and then you also gain a few things that you couldn't do before. So in a nutshell, it's more difficult to play chords on a fretless instrument just because you have to adjust the intonation of every finger on the fretboard by itself. And that means the more fingers you have at the same time, the more difficult, exponentially more difficult it gets to intonate the chord properly. So open strings become a lifesaver, basically, because the more open strings you can use, the better you can intonate, as you can basically ping off of the open string, which is perfectly in tune, hopefully, when you're intonating those fretted notes on the fretboard. And basically that's what I've been doing. I've been developing a new vocabulary of chord shapes on a fretless guitar based on the open strings. The more complicated those things are on the neck, the more difficult it is to intonate. So you kind of want to limit yourself to more sparse chord forms in general. But yes, chords are possible, and fretless guitar players like myself do it all the time. And the last misconception for today, number 5, fretless guitar only works in certain styles of music. Again, not true at all, because it basically just depends on what you want to do with the instrument and how far you are willing to go to put in the time and the effort to make it work. So I've been playing fretless guitar in jazz, fusion, drum and bass, extreme metal, rock, pop, everything. I've done covers of Ariana Grande songs, of opera singers, and most people will be familiar with the band Obscura that I used fretless guitars in. So one of the reasons for this misconception, I think, is that the material out there that you are able to easily find for fretless guitars is a little bit limited. So I remember seeing this YouTube clip of Guthrie Govan years ago where he basically plays blues slide guitar on the fretless instrument. And he does it marvelously well. But for many, many people that I've talked to, that was their introduction to fretless guitar. And they assume, not having many other reference points, that this is how you play fretless guitar. This is how it sounds like when you play fretless guitar. And they could not imagine, somebody like myself or Sean Lane or maybe even Steve Vai playing fretless guitar in a completely different context here and there. And it's basically like if you'd have no concept of what electric guitar can do in general, and you go into a club and there's an an indie band playing. You know, the guitar is slightly out of tune. It's just 8 notes, and it's just, you know, kind of like a early 90s grunge thing maybe. And then you go out and say, okay, well, that's guitar. That's all the guitar can do. And then imagine your surprise if then afterwards you suddenly hear Dream Theater. So that's just a rough example of what fretless guitar is to me. You know, it is possible to be used in all styles and all situations, but you just have to find ways to make it work, right? It's a difficult instrument to play, and it has its advantages and disadvantages. And depending on the style of music, you know, you have to develop different strategies for it to be an asset. That is true, but you can still do it in any type of music that you want to. And that's it for today. So if you like this content, then please consider liking and subscribing. And if you have other questions about fretless guitar and maybe other misconceptions that you've heard, leave them in the comments below for maybe a future part 2. And if you're still wondering about how fretless guitar can sound in different musical contexts, here's an Ariana Grande cover for you to check out. And here is an Obscura song where I played fretless guitar. So there you go.